Hey, y'all, you know what time it is? Woo! Get into it! Get into it! Yes! Get into it. All right, y'all, we are back with Storytime with Chris. Thank you for joining Genie's Magic Carpet Ride. Please look at the exits here and here and here and here, here, everywhere. No, I'm just kidding. I have way too much fun. I'm so goofy. We are back with story time. I'm doing it a little bit early because I have some things to take care of later this evening. So I do apologize for those who are still at work and may not be able to catch this until tonight, which the beauty of it is, that's what story time is for. You're here to watch it at your leisure and enjoy it on your own time. But we are back. We are back with the Black Cauldron, and we've just been introduced to Ordu, Orgok, and Ordu, Orgok, and Ordu, Orgok, and Orwin. I'm so sorry, y'all. Orwin, Ordu, and Orgok. There we go. Ordu being the leader, and then Orgok being the more snippy person, and then Orwin is just bubbly and fair, but also just as powerful. But we got a sneak peek because apparently these three enchantresses know Dalbin, and they called him Little Dalbin, which gives me the impression that they may have known Dalbin when he was younger, before he became an old sage. So, let's find out what happens next. And no, I don't own the music that you're listening to in the background, which is brought to you by Mr. Ambiance. Go check them out. Chapter 12. Little Dalbin. Taran's jaw dropped. Before he could answer, the enchantresses had crowded around the companions and were leading them to the cottage. In wonder, he turned to Fluter, who looked less pale now that Ordu had stopped speaking of toads. Little Dalbin? Taran whispered. I've never in my life heard anyone talk about him that way. Can they mean the same Dalbin? I don't know, whispered the bard in return, but if they think it is, great Balin, don't tell them otherwise. Inside, with a great deal of joyous bustling that in fact accomplished little, the enchantresses hurried to straighten up the chamber. Orwin, in obvious excitement and delight, brought out a number of rickety chairs and stools. Orgok cleared the table of crockery by brushing it onto the floor. Ordu clapped her hands and beamed at the companions. I should never have thought about it, she began. Oh, no, my duck, she cried suddenly to Ilodwi, who had drawn closer to the loom and had just bent forward to examine the fabric. Mustn't touch. Nasty prickles if you do. It's full of nettles. Come, sit with us, there's a love. Despite the sudden warmth of their welcome, Taran glanced at the enchantresses with uneasiness. The chamber itself filled with odd forebodings and he could not name, which eluded him like shadows. Gurgi and the bard, however, appeared delighted at the strange turn of events and set heartily to eating the food that soon arrived at the table. Taran looked questioningly at Ilonwi. The girl guessed his thought. Don't be afraid to eat, she said behind her hand. It's perfectly all right. Not the least bit poisonous or enchanted. Ooh, come on. There we go. I can tell. I learned how when I was staying with Queen Okren and learned to be a sorceress. What you do is... Now, my sparrow, Ordu interrupted. You must tell us all about dear little Dalbin. What is he doing? Does he still have the Book of Three? Well, why, yes he does, Taran said with some confusion, beginning to wonder if the enchantresses did not know more about Dalbin than he did. Poor little Robin, remarked Ordu, and such a heavy book. I'm surprised he would even be able to turn the pages. Well, you see, Taran said, still puzzled, the Dalbin that we know, he isn't little. I mean, he's rather elderly. Elderly? Burst out Fluter. He's every bit of 380 years old. Cole himself told me. He was such a dear, sweet little thing, Orwood with a sigh said. All pink cheeks and chubby fingers. I love babies, said Orgok, smacking her lips. His hair is quite grey, said Tard, who could not bring himself to believe these strange creatures were indeed speaking of his old teacher. The idea of the learned Dalbin ever having pink cheeks and chubby fingers was beyond his imagining. He has a beard, too, he added. A beard? Cried Ordu. What's little Dalbin doing with a beard? Why in the world should he want such a thing? Such a charming little tadpole. We found him in the marsh one morning, said Orwin, all by himself in a great wicker basket. It was too sweet for words. Orgok, of course. At this, Orgok made an irritable noise, and her eyes glared from the depths of the hood. Come now, dear Orgok, don't look so disagreeable, said Ordu. We're all friends together here. We can talk about such things now, while I shall put it this way and spare Orgok's feelings. She didn't want to keep him. That is, not in the usual sense, but we did, and so we brought the little fledgling to the cottage. He grew very quickly, added Orwood. Why, it was no time before he was toddling around and talking and doing little errands. So kind and polite. Ah, perfect joy. And you say he has a beard? She shook her head. Curious notion. Wherever did he find it? Yes, a delightful little sparrow he was, said Ordu. But then, she continued with a sad smile, there was that distressing accident. We were brewing some herbs one morning, a rather special potion. And Dalbin, sighed Orwin, sweet little Dalbin, was stirring the kettle for us. It was one of those kind, thoughtful things he was always doing. But when it came to a boil, some of it bubbled up and splashed out. It burned his poor dear fingers, Ordu said, but he didn't cry, no indeed. He just popped his fingers into his mouth, the brave little starling. Of course, some of the potion was still there, and he swallowed it. As soon as he did that, explained Orwin, he knew every bit as much as we did. It was a magical brew, you understand, a recipe for... Okay, that's interesting. So, the page, what I'm guessing is the next word was supposed to be wisdom, but it's literally, like, printed out. So, there's the last sentence, right? The last part of the sentence on this page. But if you look up here, there's a blank space right here. A printing error, to be sure. After that, Ordu went on, it was out of the question to keep him with us. It would never have been the same, no. It would never have done at all. You can't have that many people knowing that much all under the same roof, especially since he was able to guess some of the things Orgok had in mind. And so we had to let him go. Really let him go, that is. Orgok by this time was the one who wanted to keep him, in our own fashion, which I doubt he would have liked. He would have been, oh, a little sweet thing, murmured Orgok. I must say we did quite handsomely by him, Ordu continued. We gave him his choice of a harp, a sword, or the Book of Three. Had he chosen the harp, he could have been the greatest bard in the world. The sword and the dear duckling could have ruled all Prydain. But, Ordu said, he chose the Book of Three. And to tell the truth, we were just as happy that he did, for it was heavy and moldy and did nothing but gather dust. And so he left to make his way in the world, and that was the last we saw of him. A good thing, sweet dear Dalbin isn't here, Fluter chuckled to Tard. Their description hardly matches. I fear they might be rather startled. Tard had been silent throughout Ordu's account, wondering how he dared bring up the matter of the cauldron. Dalbin has been my master as long as I can remember, he said at last. Deciding frankness was the best way to go about it, especially since the enchantresses seemed able to guess when he was not telling the truth. If you are as fond of him as I... We love him dearly, the sweet thing, said Ordu. You can be sure of that. Then I beg you to help us carry out his wishes and the wishes of Gwydion, Prince of Dawn.
Tarn went on. He explained what had taken place at the council, what they had learned at Dargate and from Gwistle. He spoke of the urgency of bringing the cauldron to Caer Dallben, and asked too whether the enchantress has seen Elodie. Ordu shook her head. A son of Pelorca? No, my duck, there's been no such person anywhere near. If he'd come across the marshes, we would have bound to see him.
We have a lovely view of the fens from the hilltop,
Orwen put in with such enthusiasm that her necklace bounced and rattled. You must come and enjoy it, indeed.
You're perfectly welcome to stay as long as you want,
she added eagerly.
Now that little Dallben's gone and found himself a beard, too, the place isn't half as cheery as it used to be. We wouldn't change you into a toad, unless you insisted on it.
Stay by all means, croaked Orgok with a leer. Our task is to regain the cauldron, Tarn pressed, preferring to overlook Orgok's remark. From what Gwistle told us... You said his crow told you, my lamb, interrupted Ordu. Don't believe everything you hear from a crow. Dolly of the fair folk believed him, Tarn said. Do you tell me now that you have no cauldron? I ask you this in the name of Dallben himself. Cauldron, answered Ordu. Why, goodness, we have dozens. Cauldrons, kettles, cookpots, we can hardly keep track of them all. I speak of the cauldron of Anuvan, Tarn said firmly. The cauldron of Aurorn and his deathless warriors. Oh! said Ordu, laughing cheerfully. You must mean the Black Cauldron. I do not know its name, Tarn said, but that may be the one we seek.
Are you sure you wouldn't prefer one of the others? Asked Orwood. They're much more attractive than that old thing and much more practical. What use have you for cauldron born? They would only be a nuisance. We can give you a kettle to brew the most marvelous sleeping potions, or one you can sprinkle on daffodils to take away that bilious yellow.
Our cauldron and our concern is with the Black Cauldron, Tarn insisted, deciding that this was indeed the name of Aurorn's cauldron. Will you not tell me the truth? Is the cauldron here? Of course it's here, replied Ordu. Why not, since it was ours to begin with, and always has been? Yours? Cried Tarn. Then Aurorn stole it from you? Stole? Ordu answered, Not exactly. No, we couldn't say it was stolen.
But you couldn't have given it to Aurorn, Eilonwy cried, knowing what he meant to use it for.
Even Aurorn had to be allowed to have his chance, said Ordu tolerantly. One day you'll understand why, for this is a destiny laid on everything, on big, ugly Corchins, as well as poor little ducklings, and a destiny laid even on us. Besides, Aurorn paid dearly for the use of it, very dearly indeed. You can be sure. The details, my duckling, are of a private nature which does not concern you. In any case, the Corchin was not to be his forever, which I'm assuming Corchin is the Welsh term for cauldron.
Aurorn swore to return it after a time, said Orwood, but when the time came, he broke his oath to us, as might be expected.
Ill-advised, murmured Orgok. And since he wouldn't give it back, Ordu said, what else could we do? We went and took it. Great Beelard, cried the bard. You three ladies ventured into the heart of Anuvan and carried the thing out? How did you ever manage it? Ordu smiled. There are a number of ways, my curious sparrow. We could have flooded Anuvan with darkness and floated the cauldron out. We could have put all the guards to sleep, or we could have turned ourselves into, well, no matter. Let us say we could have used a variety of methods. In any case, the cauldron is here again. And, the enchantress added, here it will stay. No, no, she said, raising a head to Tarn. I can see you like to have it, but that's out of the question. Much too dangerous for wandering chicks like you. My goodness, we couldn't sleep at night. No, no, not even for the sake of little Dolben. In fact, Ordu went on, you'd be much safer being toads than having anything to do with the Black Cauldron. She shook her head. Better yet, we could change you into birds and have you fly back to Caerdorban immediately. No, indeed, she continued, rising from the table and taking hold of Tarn's shoulders. Off you ducklings must go, and never give a second thought to the corction. Tell dear little Dolben and Prince Gwydion we're terribly sorry, and if there's anything else we could possibly do, but not that. Oh my, no. Taran started to protest, but Ordu cut him short and guided him rapidly to the door, while the other enchantresses hustled the companions after him. You may sleep in the shed tonight, my chickens, said Ordu. Then first thing in the morning, away with you to little Dolben, and you shall decide whether you'd rather go on your own legs, or, she added this time without a smile, on a pair of your own wings. Or, muttered Orgok, hopping all the way. And that is where we will end for tonight. I love this story. I love these ladies because they're awesome. And outside of the more mythological basis for the Morva, with Orwin, Orgok, and Ordu, they were my favorite characters in the Black Cauldron movie from Disney. I love the campiness. Okay, so let's break down terms. Camp is a style of genre that refers to the absurd, the melodramatic, and the over-the-top nature of storytelling and character development. An example of campiness would be the movie Grease. Grease is a campy movie because it is set in a time period that actually isn't as happy-go-lucky as it would be on historical paper, but it revels in the highlights of what makes the 1950s and 60s so memorable. Another form of campiness would be one of my favorite musicals and one of my favorite movies, Little Shop of Horrors, which is it's fun, it's great. Tashina Arnold and Tisha Campbell from the 90s TV show Martin were in that musical. It was great. Let's see, another form of campiness. I would say that Hocus Pocus is a form of camp because it takes that wild absurdity of these three witches, the Sanderson sisters, being in modern day America and still holding on to their 16th century sensibilities while still being able to quite smoothly integrate into the 2020s. It's just great. If you haven't seen Hocus Pocus 2, you should totally watch it. It was a great movie. I loved it. There's many examples of campiness and campy stuff. The Princess Bride is a campy movie. That is a great example of camp, of just highly melodramatic, highly absurd, fourth wall breaking realness. It's just great. Camp is fantastic. We live for the camp in this house. So without further ado, I will see you next time. Bye, y'all. Be good to each other. See ya.